Welcome to the Vino Karma Project. My name is Amanda Layden, and I am your host. I am here with the amazing Michele Thomas. Michele is a CMS certified sommelier and the general manager and buyer at Green Grape Wine and Spirits, located in Brooklyn's Fort Greene neighborhood. She's also a writer, educator, editor with deep roots in food, wine, and publishing. She's a former executive editor for the curriculum at the International Culinary Center and the co-author of Culinary Careers for Dummies. And her writing has appeared in a ton of different places. And you can also go and follow her on Instagram at Bed-Stuy Somm. Michele, welcome. I'm really happy you're here, and I can't wait to dig into the conversation today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. It's very fun.
Me too. So I want, for folks who don't know you out there, can you just share with them how you got into this industry, the wine trade, and what your journey has been up until this point?
Yeah, it's really funny. I was thinking about that before this, and I'm always drawn to the words that Andre Max said once. He feels like people who get into the wine trade have different lives, like a couple of different lives before you find yourself here. And I've definitely fallen into that bucket. I started out as an editor. I was editing children's books right out of college, and I studied journalism. But I was always into food, always into flavor, always into taste. And I found myself at this job at the International Culinary Center, which was formerly the French Culinary Institute. And I was in charge of developing all the curriculum for the professional and amateur programs. So all of the textbooks, all of the recipes that came my way. And along the way, they started to develop this wine program. And I had the opportunity in developing curriculum to meet some amazing people. I met Scott Carney, who's a master somm, and he was absolutely great. And he got me excited about it. I'm like, I always liked wine. And I was like, yeah, let me get a glass or three after work at the bar with all my coworkers. But it was in studying and working on this project that I got really interested. And I studied with him. I studied under him. I took their intensive wine training program. I got certified. And then I found myself at the Green Grape. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm going to try it. So I started working one day a week as a cashier. And over the years, I got more interested in wine, more interested in the trade of wine, the retail side, which is something I'm also very interested in, and worked my way up to GM. So that's my journey. Every day, it's a new adventure. It's a new discovery.
I love that. I also love how you quoted Andre Mack, because he was the first person that I interviewed that we rolled out here at the Vino Karma Project. So I got to hear from him firsthand, and I think he's such a icon in the industry and such a wonderful man. So I appreciate that it's like all coming full circle. People are quoting him, not even knowing. So I love it.
It's so great.
I also love the origin stories of how people fall. I think a lot of people kind of fall into this industry. Yeah. We discover that we have something we love about food and wine, but most of us, or not most of us, some of us didn't grow up around food and wine.
Same here.
Yeah. And then now you have this amazing career where you get to make buying decisions, wine buying decisions. And I think it's incredible. So how have things, we're still in a pandemic. So when this comes out, we'll still be in a pandemic. How have things been going for you and the shop in the pandemic?
It is such an incredible, it's been such an incredible year, right? It's been so challenging and it's been so much work. And the pandemic really forced us to change the way that we do business. It forced us to put our ideals as a business into motion. We've always been about, at Green Grape, we're always about community focus. We're always about small batch producers and caring for the communities that we're a part of. So that was a lot of what we did. We extended our delivery services. We built out our teams. We now have a fully functioning online grocery and delivery combo business, and I'm running logistics for that. And I was like, I had no idea. I was like, oh, okay. I used to have one guy in a scooter. We had a couple of different things going. Learning about website and supply chain issues. We had even a program at the beginning to bring, food and wine to seniors who couldn't get out or people who were infirm, to try to put ourselves we're out here. Even the owner of the company was out in a car driving around. So it's really forced us to be to learn quickly, to adapt on our feet, and to like make sure that we are embodying the principles that we stand for. That's something I'm very proud of.
I honor you for that, because I think, it's so important as a pillar of the community to be doing those things and to realize and recognize what your community needs. And if there's any good that has come out of this pandemic, I think one, there's a sense of community that has been created in new ways. And two, the sense of innovation, or people having to learn skills really, really quickly in order to adapt.
Yeah. And, like it was even, the moments when you all feel like very dragged down, we're like, I'm working until 1:00 in the morning, I'm exhausted. At the end of the day, I still feel like, hey, I'm learning something new. You can't say it's boring, like you're definitely learning something, and you're just growing. You feel yourself growing. And I'm really proud of what we as a shop have accomplished and what this community has accomplished. Like we've really come a long way, and I feel good about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the wine industry itself.
Yeah.
As we know, it hasn't been the most welcoming to people of color or to women. What assumptions or stereotypes still persist that you think need to go away?
Oh gosh, how much time we have? There's so many. It's definitely better than it has been for years, but there's still some pesky ones. The assumption that if you're a woman of color, if you're a Black woman, you like sweet wine. That's the number one assumption, which is cool if you like sweet wine, but not everybody does. I have been even here in instances where people have walked right past me, not realizing that I'm the manager on the floor. They go for the nearest white person who will go and say, hey, can you help me with this, Michelle? And I'm like, yeah, here I am. We're doing it. So that's definitely something, is that you don't know about wine, that you only like sweet wine, that, it's that wine is bougie, so if you like wine, then you're a natural snob, and that women only like sweet wine, and they only like champagne. There's a lot of those that go around. And I guess one of the other ones that I find really pervasive is that wine is not for every budget. And that reaches across like class and racial lines, because wine is for every budget. You can find wonderful wine for $10 and wonderful wine for $500. It's really about like sourcing it and looking for it and finding great growers out there.
Those are great. One of my favorites is when I go to dinner, particularly pre-COVID, particularly when I'm networking, and if the person I'm networking with is a man and they mansplain the wine list to me.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
I'm like, really? Because I went to the WSET in London. I went to wine school. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, there's definitely a few of those guys who try to explain to you about the wine that they're buying. You're like, what I really want? Have you ever heard of this place called Burgundy? And I'm like, yeah, I've been there a few times. Yeah, I got it.
Just slightly.
Just slightly. Yeah. I may know a thing or two about wine. Just today, I had a rep kind of mansplain to me some regions that he was selling me on, and I'm like, specialize in Rhone, but cool. Go off, buddy.
And bye-bye. So one of the things that I've been talking to colleagues about, and people that when we're having these conversations, is, what happened last May with the murder of George Floyd, and then people taking to the streets in May and in June. And kind of this, what I felt was either a turning point, I hope not just a moment in time, but maybe also collective reckoning. Do you feel that with that happening in America, that there has been any effect on the industry at all in terms of how people are viewing the wine industry or supporting perhaps underrepresented voices or winemakers of color?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time in wine right now. I really, really believe that. And I think some of that is wholeheartedly pushed by these conversations, these reckonings that we're having to say, hey, things have not been right in this business for a long time. Like systemic racism is here and systemic inequality is here. And, if we don't confront it, we're actually just going to perpetuate it. And I think that there has been some slow bits. I think there's a lot more activation on the part of consumers who are now aware, maybe that of things that they didn't know before, or that they are aware that there are many more winemakers of color and many more women winemakers. I still meet people who are surprised when they meet women winemakers. And I'm like, okay, there's definitely it's still out there, but people come in and hey, do you have any, Black owned wines? Do you have any of these? And then naming products, which I think is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I definitely think that, on the business side, people are starting to have more conversations about how can we foster diversity and equity in our businesses? How can we make sure that the people who are selling wine look like the people who are drinking wine, look like the people who are making wine? How do we do that? And knowing that it makes great sense as humans and it makes great sense as businesses to do that.
And what steps are you specifically taking to ensure there's more diversity and representation in the industry?
Yeah. So I'm super excited because I feel like in this role as GM, I get to have more buying decisions. And so I get to source and look out for, underrepresented voices in wine, winemakers of color, women winemakers, small producers, all that stuff. I hire a diverse staff, people from every walk of life, queer people, brown people, everyone hey, let's come in here and learn about wine, And more recently, I've become involved with a project called the Fulton Street Fellowship, which was started by Chris and Christina Leon. They run Leon and Sons down the street, just like neighbors, basically. We were talking during the summer after seeing everything that went down in the demonstrations and feeling this sense of powerless, what can we do? And the idea became, what if in order to push, what is it that keeps people away from this trade? A lot of it comes down to education and access. And so this fellowship came around, what if we could take care of the education part? What if we could pay for top tier wine education and exposure to those higher level wines? Because if you didn't grow up in wine, I grew up with a jug of Gallo in my house,
Me too.
It came out for the holidays.
White Zin.
Yeah, exactly. And you thought that was wine, but and wine study is expensive, and also maybe you're working and the program is open for anyone who's interested in working in wine. So maybe someone is a bar back and is really interested about what happens on the floor. We wanted to say, hey, come in and learn, and that's something that we're really working on and building a community so that we create, opportunities for people to get into wine and also opportunities for people who are in leadership positions to see, hey, there's more people who wanted to get into wine than you think. So creating cultural change from both ends of it is really our goal.
That is wonderful. And it is so, so needed. I also think about, sometimes the immigrant populations who are oftentimes the backbone of the wine industry in America.
Yeah.
I'm out here in California. So, I think about them and how, there isn't a path necessarily to get folks who are picking the grapes into positions where, they are making decisions or they are making the wine or they are front of house at a restaurant. And it's so important, I think, as you're saying, to have that tie to, well, not only am I seeing people like me, but we're also changing the system from various sides.
Yeah. And it also creates opportunities to change the way that we handle food and wine pairing. So we're thinking about different types of cuisines. So many people, when you get into wine, it's all French, Italian, and there's so much more food out there. And it all these create ways to access wine and to get interested in wine and to sell wine and, to really do what it's about, which is bringing people together.
Yeah, I love that. And I really, I'm hoping that we start to see some of the structural systems change. It's time.
Yeah, it's really time. It's really time. You have to make it, I think, something that these companies want to do, these distributors want to do. It's one thing to know that there are Black winemakers out there. It's another thing to know that they have distribution in the state where you are. you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I think if consumers stay aware, and we as like makers and sellers and retailers stay aware, we can bring those people also into portfolios, and that's how we get them. That's how we
Yes.
get that access.
Yes. Yes. So important. What do you think that organizations or brands, some steps that they need to be taking in order to really kind of put their money where their mouth is to have more diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think about it a lot. Um, because I always felt like with a lot of brands, they weren't reaching out to people that I knew and reaching out to me. And I think that they need to maybe choose ambassadors thoughtfully,
Mm.
choose diverse ambassadors, create diverse campaigns. When you do these ad campaigns, who's in them? What are
Mm.
these people doing? What are they eating? Where are they? Like, those are some of the ideas to have. And like, how are you selling them? Where are you selling them? Go do some of the footwork, because there are 1,001 people out there who are interested and want to know about these brands or want to know about these wines, which could be wonderful, but they're just being left out of the conversation, and they're finding out about them, months or years after something comes out. Like I'm finding people who are just now learning about Andre Mack, and he's been in the industry for so long. You're like, wow, he's an icon. Like, everybody knows Andre Mack. And it's like, no, actually, because some of those, like, he's done a great job, but there's a lot of people who still don't know. So I think that is something that also needs to happen on both ends. Like, brands need to expose their product to diverse audiences. But also, like, white suburban audiences need to have the same exposure. Like, there's other, so that everybody sees that what's out there, not this very narrow aperture of what the wine is.
Those are so many great questions as well for brands to start thinking about, really like looking at that full picture of, like you said, like the lens at which they're looking at their products. Also, I think thinking about if we're specifically talking about Black Americans, they have $1 trillion worth of buying power in this country.
Yeah.
And
just think about activating that, like, where they want to spend the money. They want the wine. How do you have to be a little more thoughtful about the approach.
Completely. So we have, in society now, this cancel culture. What do you think that, companies or brands need to be thinking about, again, tied to the consumer? Because we're seeing how rapidly that cancel culture, or even Black Twitter, for example, can take a brand down. So what do you think they need to start thinking about?
Yeah, I really think they need to do their due diligence in how they represent themselves. Be very, and this comes from hiring diverse people on the brand side as well. Make sure how these brands are represented. Like, is the funny tongue-in-cheek ad that you're putting out really playing on some stereotype of something like that? Like, that can take a brand down very, very quickly. And I think that consumers, what's wonderful about now in wine is that consumers do have so much more awareness and so much more power. And I think brands need to be forthright with them. Tell them what's in the wine. Tell them where the wine comes from. People want to know. People want to ask. And I think if brands put themselves out there as being honest and open, the customers will respond to that as a way, in a welcoming way. They want a company to be welcomed, and they want to welcome. So I think it should work that way.
That's great. What emerging trend are you really excited about in the industry right now?
I am super stoked that chillable reds are a thing now.
Yeah.
I feel like sometime last year, I was always into light-bodied reds. Like, as a Pinot nerd, I'm always, I love Pinot. I love light-bodied wines. I love Val d'Agay. I love that kind of stuff. Like, Gamay's having this moment right now. Everybody's all about the bougie. I love that chillable red is having its day. Like, it's so great. It's very flexible. I think that's really fun. And I do enjoy that there is continuing growth in the canned wine space. And there's some good stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Like we were all burned in the early 90s and 2000s by some terrible packaging choices, but there's stuff out there now that's really solid. And I like that idea that you can, make it more casual.
It only took the wine industry hundreds of years to innovate and put things in cans. Like, come on.
It does. They get there eventually, but it did.
One of the things that always amazes me is like how insular this industry can be and how the industry kind of refuses to look outside of its narrow space for innovation.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of like talking to each other. I think that's how the wine industry has been for so very long. And that's why this time is really exciting, because they're realizing, hey, we can't just talk to each other, and we have to talk to consumers, and consumers are talking to us. Like, holy crap, they don't know.
How novel. Let's actually talk to the person who's drinking our product.
There's an idea, like the end, and I think that's really wonderful. And I also think that's something that's happened as part of it is a byproduct of the pandemic, as people have not been going out to drink, unfortunately, because the restaurants have been suffering, but it's allowed retailers to really shine, and for people to start to see retailers as, hey, these are places that are in your community that can like really tell you about wine that's approachable for you, and you can take it into your everyday life. And it's not just like a fancy highfalutin time out kind of thing. Like, you know what? I usually tell people, like, what mood are you in when they look for a wine? Like, are you having a bad day, or you want a date? Like, what's happening? Did you just get some fuzzy slippers, some Girl Scout cookies? I got a wine for you. We're going to pair it. We're going to have a great time.
People always ask me, they're like, what's your favorite wine? And I'm like, well, if I had kids, that'd be like asking me what my favorite kid is.
I know.
It's like, it depends on my mood. It depends on what I'm eating. It depends on the weather.
Yeah, it is. It's so funny.
And that's a great approach too. People coming in and meeting them where they are to allow them to become a little bit more educated about themselves and their palates and what they like and what mood they're in. It's a real, like, wine is a living, breathing thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just having fun with it. Like, bring the fun back to wine. Like,
yes,
you can do whatever you want with it, and like, let that be how you make it part of your life. So it doesn't feel like it's separate from you. It doesn't feel like wine sellers and winemakers are these, like, looking down on you on their like glasses, like, oh, you peon, like, you don't know how to drink this thing, and it's like, oh no, I got some really good Oreo cookies and some Thai food. Hit me,
I think we should, like, I was thinking about things that people really started doing during the pandemic. One is, if you looked in anybody's recycling bins, they're drinking a lot more.
So true.
Two is, I don't know about you, but in the beginning, I was eating a hell of a lot of Ben and Jerry's. So it's like, what can I pair with my Ben and Jerry's?
Exactly.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, so much ice cream. So much ice cream.
And thank you, all of the winemakers, because I was joking at one point. I love sherry. Like, sherry is one of my jams.
Love sherry.
Oh, love it. So I was joking that I was like single-handedly keeping the sherry producers in business in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I feel like even as a consumer myself, I've explored new things that I don't drink that often. So I'm a sherry nerd, so I love sherries. Ports, like, bubbles. Bubbles have gone up as a category. I've been drinking more bubbles. I never used to be a bubble girl. I love bubbles.
Oh, I love me some bubbles. Yeah, I love bubbles.
So
I just got a shipment yesterday of Bodkin's, of his wines. And he has a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc that I'm really excited to taste.
Ooh, exciting.
So excited.
Really fun.
So excited. So what upcoming winemakers or brewers or distillers or folks in the trade are you really excited about, and should we go out and support right now?
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many that I'm really loving, but I've been quietly obsessed. Well, not quietly, because I'm telling you everyone about it. It's the Karim Vianney. There it is. Karim Vianney Chenas. he's a Beaujolais producer. And I first learned about him a few years ago in some of his earlier vintages. He's just used to just produce a Nouveau, but he grew up in Mordaunt. He is from North African heritage, and he used to work as a baker. And he was just like, you know what, I really like wine. And he trained with Chaminade. He trained with some really incredible winemakers. And he's producing this gorgeous product. It's light, it's easy, it's chillable, it's like it's everything you want a Beaujolais to be. It's just so good. I love that.
That just sounds amazing. I also love these like multi-hyphenate folks who are like, I was a baker, now I'm a winemaker. Like, I love this so much. It's because it's like, anybody I think who's interested in this trade, there's an element of like nerdy geekiness about it because it has history, it has culture, it has all of these names you have to recognize and remember. And it's just like, I love it for its cultural journey around the world. And so like bringing that to the fore of this producer who has this really interesting background, was a baker, now he's a winemaker, like so cool. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, the stuff is great. And he's a character. He's like, his whole like theme is like sets, rock and roll, and yame. And I'm like, okay, he just loves to like get in there and like mess around, which I love that about him.
It's funny because when you were describing it, I was like, oh, that sounds sexy. And now that you say he's in a sex drug, I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Where's this t-shirt? I'm trying to get him to send me this t-shirt because I want one. It's so good.
Everybody needs it. You should say, I'll like import them into America and I'll sell them at the shop.
Yeah, for sure. He's so good. So good. My other favorite right now, I love Barbaresco too. I mean, like what's not to love? One of my favorite producers right now is Maria Marcarino. She does Punset.
Ooh, okay.
And she is absolutely like badass woman winemaker, gorgeous stuff. She was the first to be certified organic in Barbaresco. And she took over her father's vineyards in like, I guess the early 90s. And they all thought she was crazy. She was one of the few women there. And they were like, who is this woman? This little girl coming out of nowhere. Like, what does she know? What does she know about organic? We don't do organic here. And so she's been organic since ever. She became certified biodynamic, I think, in the 2000s. And she just makes these really beautiful, elegant, extremely approachable wines. She does watercolors. So she paints, like she produces labels. Like she's a really fascinating character. And like the way she talks about her wines with so much passion and she doesn't make it fancy. She's just like, I want to make wine that I want to drink. I want to make wine that I can drink now, that I don't have to wait until I'm 55 years old to drink this wine. I want to drink this wine now, and I want it to be fun. And gorgeous wines.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely going to have to check those out. So is there anything that I haven't asked you about yourself or about the trade that you want people watching and listening to know?
Cool. Tough one. I would say, so one thing I'm working on is I'm trying to figure out how to tell my story in food and drink, because what I love about this trade is that it's the biggest business no one knows anything about. Wine just appears. No one has any idea how it gets there. No one knows the people who worked in this trade and how many different categories there are, And so I've been collecting stories now of like, talking to truck drivers who were like, hey, there was a tornado, so there's no wine in this part of the country for like, 3 weeks. And like, so some of these like funny instances, I'd love to like put those together into a memoir piece that I'm working on. So that
is so cool. I love it. I can totally see this like series too,
right?
Yeah, because you're so right. You don't stop to think like, okay, well, there's a farmer who's making these grapes. Then somehow that has to get bottled. Somehow that has to get to the consumer. Somehow there's truck driver. It's like, I think about the other thing that's going on in America right now or all over the world, the distribution channels. Like, how do we get vaccines to the world? But it's the same thing. It's like this this whole machine that goes on. And I'm sure you have collected some incredible and amazing stories that you could continue to share and leverage their voices and your voice too. So I love that. I can completely see it.
Yeah, that's my goal, is to, like, just make, like, let people see what it is, and I because it is a wonderful thing. I met so many great people just in the trade, yeah. And I think as far as like the industry itself, I think as long as we continue this ongoing reckoning with systemic racism, sexism, like the whole scandal last year with the Court of Master Sommeliers, I mean, that was a big old giant stink bomb, you know what I mean? But, you can see what's happening after that is like associations around the world are now saying, hey, wait, we need to really look at this and take some time to be very self-reflective. And if there's another thing that this pandemic has given us, it's given us time to do that. It's given us like, hey, you're not going anywhere right now. You're in your slippers. We're sitting here. Let's think about how to do this the right way so that when the world opens again, we can make really smart choices and continue to build and grow. I think that is the opportunity that I hope that the trade takes advantage of right now.
I hope so too. This trade really needs, in a lot of ways, to be broken down and built back up. Yeah. It really does, and still when, we were talking about the consumer and still the decisions that are being made, particularly in the large organizations and by the big distributors, it doesn't tick and tie with who's actually drinking the wine. And then they wonder, why are we losing millennial consumers? Why are millennials saying that they don't drink wine? Why are these hard seltzers winning out? Like they're not being very thoughtful and proactive about how they change, those structures within. So I really hope you're right. And I hope this isn't just a moment, that it becomes more of a movement to something greater.
Yeah, I'm determined, and in my little, in my little shop here in Brooklyn, and, working with Green Grape and working with the fellowship, I think that it's these people, it's us little guys down on the ground. We're the grassroots, and I think that if we keep pushing and really being thoughtful in how we approach it, and, tell the distributors what we want to sell, like the consumers tell us what we want, what they want, we want to tell them what we want. And all of this, like we can create this systemic change. We really just have to keep our eye on it and do it. Like, don't get bored, just do it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I really, really appreciate you. I see you, and I know you're doing. I know you're doing amazing things, and I cannot thank you enough for your time and spending the time to have this conversation with me. For those of you watching, remember to go out there and follow Michele at Bed-Stuy Somm on Instagram. And also, if you are in the Brooklyn area, if you live in Fort Greene, please support Green Grape Wine and Spirits. Oh, there you go. Yeah, right on her shirt. So cheers to you. And for all of you watching, make sure you continue to go out there and create change in the world one sip at a time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.